Do we know who's going first?
She's at the top of the bill.
Okay.
Unless you want me to.
No, I don't mind. All right.
We have two speakers today, Dr. Vanessa Kettering from psychology and Dr. Greg Hunter from economics. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Kettering.
All right. Thanks so much, Dean Horner. Here we go. Glad to be here. And we will make sure that we have the right view.
Does the dean wish to say anything since it is her show? Oh, she just stayed. Okay. I just don't want to steal the whole show here.
She invited us to lecture, so you have an opportunity to have a bite, which is wonderful. So very cool. All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Vanessa Kettering. Happy to be here as a lecturer in the psychology department, Cal Poly Pomona. We do have some colleagues joining from outside. So what I'm going to talk about today is recovering beautifully, and recovering at all is great. And we wanted to see if we could actually move that into something that would be even more fabulous. All right. So starting off, I'm going to be introducing data from Mindfulness and Recovery. It's a new program that's been developed, and foundationally, it is based on 7 skills, and these can be used as basically an adjunct to other types of recovery, 12-step facilitation. So it is something that was added, and the founder here in the front, John Bruna, saw an issue in long-term recovery that, certainly people in general were having multiple attempts in substance use facilities for treatment. And so we kind of saw a gap, and then also seeing even folks in longer term recovery that were not finding well-being, that were really not, even with physical recovery and abstinence, were, still miserable, sometimes had suicide attempts and suicide completion. So he really saw a need and an opportunity to put together a new program, which is now Mindfulness and Recovery. And these are the 7 skills. So values, really starting people off with, of course, if we want to live a long, healthy life, why do we want to do that? What are we valuing? And the way to kind of back that up is by training attention. And then wisdom, equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, and action. So I won't unpack each of these, but they are they're baked into the program that we took into a residential treatment facility. And they're really, of course, all hand selected to be supportive of quality, recovery, and things that will kind of be in place when people do have those cravings, and, certainly based on data that being able to actually be aware of what you're thinking while you're thinking it, or what you're doing while you're doing it, is, of course, an important skill for anyone, but certainly those cultivating recovery. So let's see. The national context, of course, probably some of us are aware of this, but in 2018, we had about 20.3 million people just in the United States alone that were aged 12 and older, so even affecting those younger folks suffering from substance use disorder. And of course, those are only those who are diagnosed, right? Our cost is estimated to be $740 billion annually, between treatment, medical care, police action, all types of things. And again, that up to 60% relapse rate following treatment attempts, and potentially even higher than that. So there is some good data, and there was a review paper came out recently in 2020 of all mindfulness-based interventions for substance use disorder. So there's good foundation to show that those skills of mindfulness can be helpful for smoking cessation, drug use prevention reduction, alcohol use disorder, eating disorders, and chronic pain. However, mindfulness and recovery had not yet been, the database is just growing as we present this study and the next one that I'll talk about briefly. So what we saw with the mindfulness interventions that were already out there was it didn't have those other skills that I mentioned previously. So training attention alone, we don't necessarily know what to do with that attention. So by building in those other wholesome qualities, positive qualities, the theory, of course, is that that would be more supportive of not just recovery, which is a key point, but also long-term well-being and, you know, those positive psychology outcomes that I like to talk about. So brief logic model, because there is a lot to the mindfulness in recovery program. And this was actually just for the particular program at Renewal Lodge, residential treatment facility in Elgin, Texas, near Austin. Oh, sorry. Okay. So this was basically what we did. This was the background that I talked about. We do have some, you know, basic assumptions, of course, that recovery is possible, that, you know, some more supportive ways of relating to the present moment are important. So mindfulness and recovery was being implemented at Renewal Lodge, and it was people that were there for a 30 to 90 day stay. And so the inputs basically were monthly visits with our MIR founder, John Bruna. They had weekly meetings with myself, who was the kind of evaluator researcher. And then we did all of this, of course, in conjunction with our clinical director, and then the other team members there at the facility. And they were really helpful in the data collection process as well. And this was all approved by our wonderful Cal Poly IRB, so much appreciated with that. And then the 8-week MIR mindfulness and recovery course becomes available to all of the staff there. So it was really kind of first building capacity to understand the qualities of the program and then implementing it with clients. And then I'm going to talk about the outcomes. So possibly a lot to get in here. But these were the activities. So the program itself is really, we have daily check-ins, so 3 times a day, actually, as a way to cultivate attention, writing down, noting skillful, unskillful habits, actions, and tendencies. Daily guidance from the mindfulness and recovery community, morning and evening meditation practice or attention training practice. They also attended a weekly meeting, recovery-based meeting of 1 hour long. Mindfulness and recovery education groups. So, you know, they were meeting in groups as you would in a residential facility, and then visits with their counselor. And then they also did have the 12-step approach built into that particular treatment center. So what we were looking at for potential short-term outcomes was we developed our own mindfulness and recovery skills measure that kind of tapped those aspects of, you know, equanimity, being accepting life's challenges with a certain level of acceptance, compassion, caring for others, loving kindness, wishing others well. And there is a strong database for the positive outcomes of those types of practices. So those are built in here. And then we also looked at mindfulness, and I will get into the more specific measures. And we wanted, with the brief inventory of thriving. So we wanted to see if, you know, how this impacted their thriving, and then whether there was a decreased craving for their substance of previous abuse. And then, of course, our long-term impacts hopefully are going to be, you know, more of that sustainable sobriety, sense of well-being, really building that meaning into life, and increased engagement with family and community. So for today's purpose, of course, we only have the short-term outcomes. We haven't started to think about how we might measure those others. But here are some highlights. So even before developing and kind of focusing on those measures, I did run focus groups with the clients, former clients, alumni, and then the staff to really kind of think about, okay, what do we want to be able to say at the end of this year-long implementation. So it was a merging of the big book and what they were calling the green book, the Mindfulness and Recovery Workbook, that really kind of bridged the 12 steps with this MIR program, the staff training, and then, the program being delivered. So that's all on the implementation side. And then I'm going to get us over to outcomes briefly. And I'm going to we did measure staff and just kind of how they felt, whether they were comfortable or knowledgeable about the program, if they felt it was aligned, and we did find it was highly aligned with their values as providers. So that was important. And then this was actually the staff recovery type behaviors. So just kind of skip through those. But we did get some, in addition to the quantitative data, some open-ended feedback from the staff. Of course, just seeing that there was a calmer and kinder interaction amongst the clients, and that, that this integration was really meaningful and something that, they were specifically glad to be able to do. And then, of course, even on the provider side, practicing the skills that they were also becoming more aware of their own thoughts and those important things. These were the recommendations. And then just to touch briefly on the client surveys, I mentioned these when we talked about the outcomes. So we had 29 clients that were able to participate, which was great. These were the folks, predominantly male, somewhat checks with kind of the overall recovery space. We did have a range of ages from 18 to, those were just the kind of general buckets, but yeah, younger and middle-aged predominantly, and then a few older folks. And then pretty much even split of people that were there for alcohol and other drugs, and then drugs other than alcohol. So kind of all there together. All right, so here's the data and so mindfulness and recovery skills, that was the measure that we created to specifically tap into whether there was an increase in skills from pre-test to post-test, was statistically significant. Mindful responding was a 4-item measure, and that there was a statistically significant increase in that. And then the brief inventory of thriving. And of course, this is from the time that they are coming into treatment to leaving. So, we would potentially expect some of these things. And then craving decrease, which was also great. Just not being kind of taxed on a daily basis with those thoughts. Here's the summary for our stats friends. So you could see that these are moderate to large effect sizes and all statistically significant. This was some more open-ended. Of course, this was just really a pilot study. Participants, some folks did leave as expected, but we actually had a pretty good completion rate, as far as this goes, especially with this population. And of course, people opted in, so that could be a little different. We weren't able to get a control or comparison group at this point because it was implementation in a particular treatment center. And then social desirability could always be an aspect of, we're supposed to be better. So quick future directions. This is actually still, of course, going on at that particular treatment center, but we are growing. So that's why I'm moving through a little bit so I can just talk about where we are with the research now. So yes, of course, more to be done. And that was what led us to our next study, which I'll just introduce briefly. Don't worry, I don't have outcomes yet. So this is the Sustainable Recovery Study. And I've actually been able to form the Sustainable Recovery Study Lab here at Cal Poly, which we also call the OK Zoomer, because we actually have people from all over nation, colleagues that are working in treatment centers that also join us. So we created an online continuing care program. The mindfulness and recovery was already something that was being implemented that's been used. And then we also created relapse prevention, a pretty standard treatment that's been around since the 80s. And we wanted to kind of offer both of those and be able to use that as, for random assignment to see what the outcomes are. And then we are working on implementing these best practices of longitudinal panel management to really increase, hopefully, retention and enjoyment. So this is pretty much the quick overview of the study. It has been IRB approved. We are recruiting folks that are in their first year of recovery. And let's see. Yes. So we have certified drug and alcohol counselors that are actually meeting weekly with the clients. And then it's an online curriculum. And let's see. So we've done, we do groups. They are randomly assigned to either the relapse prevention or mindfulness and recovery. And they do get workbooks. So there's no opportunity for participants to be blinded in that case. And then here's the course facilitation. So there are daily activities there on Canvas. They have their weekly Zoom meetings with the clinicians. And then we have pre-test and post-test data. So some of the similar measures from the pilot, and then a few additional ones. And these are inclusion criteria. So just to give us an idea, so we've actually run 4 groups so far, 2 of each, mindfulness and recovery and relapse prevention. Our approximate sample size is about 22 as far as people that actually completed. So you can see it's a little low for 4 groups. That started off with this clinical limitation of keeping groups under 12 folks, which is a recommendation from state of California. And so we're still working on those longitudinal panel management, kind of making contact with other treatment centers. So that's where we are now. Recruitment, retention is always the big thing, and really having people understand what it is we do so that they could offer that and potentially integrate it into their own curriculum. So with all of that, it's exciting. We're planning to run at least one more set of groups in early January before the IRB expires in May. And then we might kind of retool because it's been very slow going with this particular model. So that is where we are at the moment. And I just want to acknowledge the Cal Poly IRB, my friends, and then kind and compassionate clients at the Renewal Lodge that really, did take part in this of their own volition. And it was, funded through a stipend of the Mindful Life program. John Bruna, his kind of dedication to this. And then as far as the pilot study, we had the clinical director. Keto was great. Evan Varty was one of our engaged research assistants. So they even took the HHS trainings and kind of became researchers on the fly. And then we had another friend there, Chance, who was helping out as well. And then for our current study, I just want to really acknowledge Judy Johnson and Brad Osborne, who are our group facilitators that are running the groups. And then our Cal Poly students who've become involved with this work. My OK Zoomer collaborator, Jim Sturgis. Wendy Insulaco is another person I mentioned who's actually working in a treatment center on the East Coast. And then some of our recent graduates, Macy and Michaela, and then our current students, Grace and Jessica. So great to have that. And just want to thank you all for your time and bearing with me as I jammed a lot of information into that short period of time. And that's our group. And please do feel free to reach out if you do care about substance use disorder or if you have connections. I have also reached out to both LA County and San Bernardino County to see if there's any kind of overlap there. So yeah, just keep putting it out there. So thanks so much.
Thank you. And we have time for about 5 minutes time for questions, comments. Any questions or comments?
So I was just curious, does it matter, or are there data that you know about on what type of substance that people are taking and the rate of recidivism? Does it matter if it's meth versus fentanyl versus
Mhm.
alcohol?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the relapse rates are probably a little bit different, and certainly, the implications of having a bad day on one of those substances is pretty different. So that is something that we actually wrote a grant to specifically target opioid users. For our purposes, so the true answer is I'm not sure of those aspects, but for our purposes, we're kind of thinking once people are detoxed, how do we support them in recovery, whatever that is? And I think there is some, at least from the implications I've seen, that point the processes of recovery and training attention, reducing craving, urge surfing, kind of that literature does just say, whatever you're trying to resist, and then of course there's the aspect of not just resisting, but building in positive habits and values. Yeah.
Is there an age difference? You just get like a correlation between the age of the client and effectiveness of I see both ways. It's like, well, if you're younger, in general, younger, even less mindful, I have a child. But that's something that they're hearing about in schools now, but mindfulness stuff is not, it's different. Whereas you're older, you are like, there's different stages of life and whatever. I wonder if there's a difference. You only have two groups really, basically, you have young and middle-aged. I wonder if you did a correlation between those two. It's only point it would be very forcefully, like some sort of correlation between the age of the person and sort of whether how much impact training would have, because they're already they have no skills already to start with, or they already have skills with less of an impact. I wonder if there's a way with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of my training is in developmental psych. So I'm always thinking about, I think of course, the idea is that this is intentional training. So you don't necessarily get it just by getting older, but certainly you pick up skills and
you're gonna have the skills already.
Right. Potentially. Yeah. Interesting.
Have you taught Psych 2204? Research methods?
Yes.
This struck me as I was listening, it really made me feel nice inside, because I was thinking, this would be such a great presentation to discuss the challenges of this kind of research and the connection between the first and second studies. And that was so beautiful in how it's like, okay, this doesn't have a comparison group, so let's throw in a comparison group. It was just wonderful. So thank you. That was really made my day. Takes me back to those days of teaching intro research.
Yes, very research
it.
method-y. Yes, I've been doing a lot of the methods here, and so it's good. Keeps me informed.
Yeah, I mean, so on that note, with the first study, you didn't mention it, or rather with the first group, you didn't mention a Canvas page. You didn't, or did I?
Right.
Maybe I missed it.
No, that was astute observation. So it is a bit of a difference of delivery method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what possible snags there might be in an online delivery method as opposed to an in-person delivery method, given that we all just went through the pandemic and had to put all of our classes online. And I don't think most of us found the experience as enriching or as enduring for our students when, delivering content online as opposed to in person. So I do wonder what steps you might have taken to control for that difference in delivery method.
Yeah, absolutely. That's, where we are. And I kind of mentioned briefly, we might retool because of that aspect of really kind of, I think, losing the real element, and probably a lot of the recovery basis is that nervous system to nervous system regulation. And you can get some of that on Zoom, and then, when you're just have a curriculum available, people aren't necessarily engaged. So we do have those Canvas metrics to see,
Right.
Where people are and how much they're using it. But I think that's another question that we could actually just compare online to some type of in-person. But then even so, it's kind of like that homework, there might always be something to do on your own. And those are things, videos and meditation practices, attention training, those types of things that people might do on their own. So.
All right, I think we need to turn this over to Greg Hunter so that he can